Okay, so this we're going to be doing the most common infractions that I've run into over the years while I've been a contractor here in Ontario. So these may not be the infractions that you're going to run into while you're doing your basement because every building code's different. In the US, the building code state to state, I'm assuming, is different. Here in Canada, every province's building code is based on the national building code, and then they interpret it in their own way and put out their own. I live in Ontario where they're super uptight, so they're rolling this out pretty deep. And you get what are called addendas. Every year they'll update the building code and they will send it to you if you buy the building code. The building code is not a cheap book. I remember when I was in school, I think it was a couple $100, but you had to subscribe to get the addendums. I think now it's not quite the same. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my list that I had here. I took a picture of it from my planner today to go through it. So the simplest one that ends up being infracted on, that's the simplest but not the cheapest to correct, is I think it's every house needs to have a mixing valve on the hot water tank. Now, the mixing valve is in place to make sure that your hot water temperature throughout your house does not reach more than 120 degrees. So it's designed to protect you and your kids from burning themselves. Now, the bigger your house and the more hot water you use, 120 doesn't get it that hot. So you may have instances where people are complaining in your house that the hot water isn't that hot. I'm going to say 5 years ago, it was about just under $400 to have a mixing valve changed. Now I'm going to say that's probably closer to 450 or 500, maybe even more. Materials and labor and everything has gone up. So what was happening in the houses that we were doing is call for inspection, and they would just walk in, look at the hot water tank, and go, "Bang, you need a mixing valve." Now they're not trying to bust you. They're not trying to catch you on things. They are doing things to try and make sure that the building code is respected, and the building code is in place to protect people sometimes from themselves. So the hot water tank, the mixing valve there, that's an easy one there for people to catch. The next one that I have that is probably one of the more common ones that I ran into, or as I was doing it longer and longer, knowing that I needed 6'5" headroom from the nose of the stairs to whatever the ceiling height was. So you end up framing down your ceiling in the stairwell. And sometimes when the landing happens and your nosing is there, especially in smaller townhouses or in bungalows where this was not planned for, you might end up not getting the headroom that you need by building code here in Ontario. So everything I'm telling you right now is based on my experience with the building code here in Ontario. So I would constantly go to the nosing. So the nosing is the tip of your stair tread, the thing you step on. So think of it nose, the end of it. And you want to measure straight up from that and try to reach 6'5". Now, the building code here is actually 6'4¾". This is in millimeters. So it's kind of annoying, but you need that headroom to be sure you're not running into anything. Now, what happens if your house is just built that way and there's nothing you can do? So there's a couple of things that happen. Sometimes they will ask you to put a rounded corner bead on that edge, especially if it's a high traffic area. They'll put a rounded corner bead so you can't like bonk your head on the corner of the corner bead and hurt yourself. Not that a rounded corner bead would be that much better if you smash your face on it, but they'll ask you to do that. They may ask you to paint it a different color than the wall. So a brighter color, something that it says, hey, this is a hazard. Again, weird, but this is what they're doing. The next one that I've been asked to do, which was by far the weirdest, was to make some type of foam padding to go on the nosing in order to pass inspection. Now, I'm pretty sure the homeowner just ripped it off when I left. After the inspection was done, that's up to them. I pretty much stapled it to it and covered it in some type of material. It was really, really, really weird. But that was one of them. An easy one to not get infracted on, you'll see this on your drawings, or you'll see it in the details of your permit, is that the door to your utility room has to be 32 inches. Okay. And that's designed so that you can move big things in and out, like your hot water tank, like your furnace, those kind of things, like your water softener if you have one. So having a 32-inch door is a requirement for your utility room. So be sure when you are doing your framing that you take into account that that door is 32. There's really no requirement for other doors in the sense that it needs to be big enough for people to walk through. Our basic standard was, bedrooms were 30-inch doors, closets were 28-inch, bathroom was 28-inch, an office, any regular room was 30-inch. So that was kind of our reference point. Another thing to understand for your utility room was that there needed to be 24 inches of access. I can't remember if it was 20 or 24 inches of access in front of your furnace. So basically in front of your furnace, which means that you'll see a little access panel that they take off where the controls are and all of that, the motherboard. If you need any servicing of your furnace at any point, those are designed, that building code specification is designed to allow a technician to come in and be able to get to that motherboard or that access panel and service your furnace. So it's there for a reason. Now, there have been instances where the rooms are built a certain way and you need to find a cheat. So what we've done in one instance was we went in and a client had an infraction. Somebody else had done the basement and we got called. And sometimes we would get called because they needed these infractions dealt with. And they didn't know how to do it themselves. The contractor they had hired or they bought the house that way and they had an inspection and all this stuff. So we went in and where the access panel is, we would simply frame in another door. So that way the service person could just open the door and access the panel. So it is not completely free from obstruction, but you can remove that obstruction because it's a door. You just open it. Another thing to think about is when you're building your, say, cabinets for electrical panels, is that you can have a cabinet on it, but it needs 3 feet of unobstructed walkway in front of it, of clearance is the word I'm looking for. So you can just open it and work on the panel. That's one of the things you want. Next, I have switches at the bottom of the stairs. Now, this was one that I had been doing this for like 5 or 6 years before this ever happened. And I put a switch out of reach of the bottom of the stairs. So the person, for safety reasons, has to be able to get to the bottom of the stairs and turn the lights on. And this was confusing to me. It's like, well, they're just around the corner. Like they're going to go, no, it's a safety thing. So whether it's right at the bottom of the stairs or right around the corner, my recollection is it needs to be within 3 feet of the bottom of the stairs so that they can be able to safely turn on the lights and see where they're going and not trip and fall. It sounds funny. However, if you do any type of construction safety training, the stat that comes out is something like 80% of all falls are from 2 feet or less, which is just an insane number. And a lot of the injuries happen at that height. You misstep and you fall and you smack your head on something. So that's kind of in line with that, having the lights at the bottom of the stairs. Now, if you're going to have a bedroom in your basement, concern for the building code is having means of egress so that if there's a fire in your house, that there's a window someone can open in order to get themselves out. Ideally, that window is going to be in the bedroom or bedrooms. If it's an apartment that you have downstairs, the requirements are going to be even more strict about exit and egress and all of that. So your local municipal building code department will have, or ideally would have, the specifications on what classifies as an egress window. We have different types here. We have canopy ones that open in, you have canopy ones that open out. Now, From the furthest means of egress, you need a meter, which is 3 feet from the window or the furthest point. So if you have a window that swings out, so if this is your wall here and this is your backyard, the window swings out, you need to have uh, space from the end of that window to climb out. So 3 meters or 3 feet is definitely what you need. If it swings in, the window needs to be able to hold itself open in order for somebody to climb out. The other catch is depending on the height of the window. Hi, Randy. Thank you very much. Appreciate you listening. Hope you're enjoying this. Is that window has to be able to stay open long enough for somebody to climb out. So usually there's a latch or a spring to it. And then you need a box of some kind, depending on the height, so that you can climb out of the window. Anybody has to be able to get up on the box or some type of attachment so that they can climb out and get out safely. That is very, very important when it comes to egress windows. There's different kinds. There's ones that open kind of um, double-sided, like they have sliders or different mechanisms. The windows have to be big enough that a human body can fit out, and there'll be a square footage requirement. In Ontario, most of the municipal building departments will have some type of spec out that you can look at as a diagram that will tell you the square footage of window that what needs to be there in order for somebody to exit. So that's a big, big deal. They will definitely look for that. If you have an unregistered basement apartment, you will need to have to think about putting in a means of egress. That is definitely just for your own state of mind. What if there's a fire? What if something happens downstairs and the person can't get out? You'll never forgive yourself for not spending, a few $1,000. That's one. Smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, the dual. You'll need those, and they need to be interconnected with the other smoke detectors in the house. So I had to do this. I moved into my in-laws' house. We are going to finish a basement apartment downstairs. So we need smoke detectors on every floor. And then we need one in the bedroom downstairs, right? You don't need one in the bedroom upstairs. You need one in the common area. So we have a hallway that everyone shares. So it sits in the middle of the hallway. Now, if I were to turn this house, I live in a student area. Eventually, I am probably going to turn this house into a full rental where all the bedrooms upstairs and downstairs, but that will be many, many years from now. I will then, because it is 2 units and the person does not live there, like the owner, I will not be living here eventually, maybe. The upper floor bedrooms all need to have smoke detectors, and they all need to be interconnected. So if you had a rental property and you had a basement apartment and then you had a 3-bedroom house above it, all 3 of the upstairs bedrooms would need the smoke detector. They would all need to be interconnected to the smoke detector downstairs so that any fire alerts every tenant that they need to get out. Little fun fact for you there. Next one that I was looking at, and a bunch of these have to do with your utility room. Most of them are fairly simple. You need to smoke proof the ceiling in the utility room. So your walls are going to be under your floor joist. What travels? Fire, smoke, travel. So above your wall, your floor joist will travel along the way. So in the cavities of your floor joist, they will ask you to stick insulation, whether it's insulation, whether it's rock wool. Most of them now require it to be rock wool, safe and sound, because it's a little more resistant to fire than fiberglass. In the past, say maybe 6 years ago, they would allow fiberglass. Now all the specs will say rock wool, at least here in Guelph. So you have to get up into the cavities and stuff the cavities with rock wool. If you have a basement apartment, to smoke proof, you need to drywall the inside of the utility room. You need to put 1 layer of tape and coat it. And if you cannot get drywall on the ceiling, which most people can't, like your utility rooms, there's ductwork, there's water pipes, there's wires because your panel's probably in there. It's a gong show. You will need to then put rock wool in the ceiling to be sure that's as fireproof as it can be. That's your best way to go there. It sucks using, they give you now you buy a bread knife type insulation cutter. And my recommendation would be gloves, long sleeves, a hat, eye protection at the very least, maybe a mask, probably a mask if you want to do that. And I would almost tape my gloves and my shirt to each other so that I wouldn't get particles of the insulation inside because it's super itchy. But yeah, that's the fun part of insulation. It's never great. So especially when you're operating over your head, because it's going to end up maybe in your eye or in your mouth, and those are just not fun places to have insulation, or maybe the least fun that are exposed. Our next one has to do with a floor drain. So your houses built after a certain area, say after 2000 at the very least, but most basements, later on had floor drains. So you have to make sure there's a floor drain in your house, especially if you're going to rent it. So my house, whoever renovated it before my in-laws bought this place some 30 years ago. They put a kitchen in. It's an apartment, not registered, nothing. And we think they made the utility room into a kitchen because the plumbing is for a laundry tub. So they cooked the kitchen sink up to that. They tiled the floor, but by doing that, they covered the floor drain. Now, I know you need a floor drain. So I'm going to have to chip up all the tile and go hunting for the floor drain and really hope that it's not filled with concrete. Odds are pretty high that it is. That if it is, now I have to smash up the floor. And after smashing up the floor, I got to cut out the plumbing or the drain and then extend it because I want the drain to be in the utility room, which I've kind of made a little bit bigger because they had the furnace in this closet. They had the electrical panel inside the kitchen cabinets. It was just a gong show. They put the hot water tank in the cold room so that every 5 years it rots out. They put the water softener in the cold room and they relocated the water meter into the cold room under the stairs. So now I got to move all of that into this little utility room that I've built and still have enough space for a good size like galley kitchen that you can walk into. It's super fun. But it was one of those things when I was walking around looking at, oh man, how am I going to make this to code? Junction boxes are another thing. So if you have junction boxes in your ceiling, you cannot drywall over them. You need to put access to them. One cheat code for that is if you have an access to it. So either you got to put a cover plate or you need to put an access panel. The real cheat is if you have a pot light close enough to it that you can get your hand in to access that junction box, that counts. So in one of our jobs, we had a junction box that somebody had put together. We couldn't delete it. They had run power to different places, and the plan was never to finish the basement. It was done by the builder's electrician. And then now we were finishing it, and we didn't know where it went, so we couldn't rerun the feed. And so we did this. It passed. So it's not your ideal, but it was safe. It met code, and we got it done. That was a pretty fun thing to learn. The most, I don't want to say annoying one, the one that sticks in my mind the most, and I think it's more the story or the moment behind it, was handrails going down the stairs. You need handrails. Okay, usually 34 to 6 inches from the nosing, as long as it's comfortable. It can't be higher than 42 inches, and to be able to go down the stairs and grab onto something. Now, I've done a fair number of these. I've been a contractor for a long time, and there was one inspector who, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, he comes in and he's looking around. I said, the handrails at the bottom of the stairs, I'm just painting it. The brackets are still on the wall, and I'm going to put it on after. He's like, no problem. Hands me the inspection sheet, infraction, no handrail. I was like, and this is an inspector that I saw, once a month. You're seeing different inspectors. I saw this guy once a month. I won't use his name, and I just thought, like, man, it's there at the bottom of the stairs being painted. The brackets are still on the wall. What more? Like, you've known me for years. You know I'm going to do this. Infraction. All right, awesome. That was a great little thing for me. That story sticks with me. And I can just remember my face as he hands it to me because back then it wasn't electronic yet. You would get these hand printed copies and then they would go back to the office and make a digital copy, and you would get sent that digital copy within 24 hours usually. Now they do it here in Guelph right on the spot. They have tablets, they're all connected. By the time they pull their car out of the driveway for inspection, you have the inspection report emailed to you. So it's pretty awesome. There's a dog. The last one that I can think of that's on my list here is if you have a walkout basement, and hold on, let me just close the door here. If you have a walkout basement and there are heat runs by the doors on at least one side, if not both, when possible, you need heat runs dropped to the floor. Now, this is because you have a big cavity that's going to be letting in cold air. So you want the heat runs at the floor. Typically, if you're going to walk around your basement and your basement's unfinished, you're going to notice that all your heat runs, or most of them, are in front of windows because this is where you kind of lose heat. It sounds counterintuitive that you're going to provide heat in the area where you're going to lose it the most, which is windows and doors. But the design is your return air is going to be closer to the middle of the room, and it is going to draw that hot air towards the middle of the room. Your best practice is usually to drop your heat runs to the floor in general, but that's added cost, not just in the ducting, which isn't the major cost, but it's like your reframing of the walls. You're going to pull your walls out further because you need the R value in behind the heat runs. You can't just have the heat runs against the foundation. Otherwise, you're going to have cold against hot, which leads to one, condensation, which leads to two. You're kind of compromising the power of the heat that you're getting. If you have your ductwork up against the foundation or close to it and not enough insulation there, you're going to have the heat coming down and it's going to be right next to cold. And you don't want that. So right now, off the top of my head, that's really everything that I can think about. Well, not off the top of my head. I made notes earlier today. Other infractions that I've had, I had one infraction for bulkhead height. When we talked about nosing height, bulkhead height is the same thing, but I really couldn't get the whole height met. And it's an inspector I know very well. And I got it as tight as I thought I could get it, and it was symmetrical. And the trunk kind of had this area where it got bigger. So I thought I got it as tight as I could in the tightest place. And the inspector came back and he said, "Hey, you're going to have to raise that." I'm like, "I can't. The duct's in there. Like, I can't. How much closer can you get?" And I said to him, "I don't know, maybe like 5/8 of an inch in this one area, but I can't get that much closer." He's like, "You got to do it." And I was like, "For 5/8 of an inch, it's 6'4". Like, he goes, "You put a subfloor. Had you not put the subfloor, you'd have had your ceiling height. The subfloor was a choice. It's not a requirement. So it's an infraction." That was probably one of the moments where I looked at the inspector. I'm like, "Man, you're just being a jerk." Like, the people that live there, none of them are over 5'8". And then the thing that I know now is I think something like less than 3% of the population is 6'2" or taller. So he was doing that requirement for 3% of the global population. That kind of that one ate at me a little bit. So as I'm rambling on here, we're getting to our last few minutes of this, and if anybody has any question, throw it in. I'm going to try to filibuster the rest of this and come up with something interesting. I saw in the comments somebody mentioning about rolling scaffold, and I'm going to do a piece on that. The rolling scaffold is like one of my favorite tools. This is from the last YouTube live I did. And it is absolutely something I cannot live without. Right now, I've got like 4 cabinets sitting on it from demoing the kitchen downstairs, and now I can just roll those cabinets wherever they need to go in the garage instead of having to move them one by one. So that's great, but it really is a tool that I can't live without. Let me kind of go here and look at my comments because there was a couple in there, and I thought this was going to take longer, but it's not. Let me go into my studio. Where are my comments here? And thank you everyone who's been I've been a little absentee on all of this lately, but it really is something that I'm trying to get back to at the new job. It's been a little complex, but hey, I'm doing my best. So for all of you out there, please, if you have questions, if you have something I want to cover, I had somebody reach out to me about bulkheads, right? And he didn't really like my whiteboard video. I will be doing something more on bulkheads once I get the garage set up and everything on. I will be building different kinds of bulkheads so that you guys can see it. And I know I talk a lot about bulkheads, but it is probably one of the bigger challenges you're going to run into as a DIYer is how to make bulkheads and how to get them to work for you. That's it's going to be something you're going to stare at the ceiling at a lot. So one of the questions I got had to do with low ceiling and putting bedrooms in. So you want to go into your local municipal building code and figure out what the requirements are for your rental, right? Whatever investment properties there are, you're going to want to look at that and make sure you're to code. Egress windows is automatically the first thing I think about. In terms of ceiling height, there are minimum requirements here in Ontario. I think the minimum requirement is that your average height be like 6'11", and that you're no more than something like 30% can be 6'4" or higher, like bulkhead height. So you get into that, but really you want to be sure that before you go investing this money, you want to respect the building code. Because if you don't respect the building code now, the building code can change, and then you're going to be subject to whatever the building code is then. It's not going to be grandfathered in from when you built it. So getting the permit, having it inspected, having all that taken care of means you will be good for the foreseeable future. You've done it to code. They can't expect you to know what the code is later on. Now, in dealing with inspectors, I'm going to give you a point of view that maybe I've mentioned before, but I'm going to mention again because we're talking a lot about this in permits and infractions. The point of view of the building department and the inspectors is they are making decisions based on the lifespan of the building and the purpose of the building, not your purpose in that moment and when you own it. So we'll use the example of your in-laws are going to be living there. This is not a rental. They're coming to stay with you. So you're putting in a little kitchen. It's not an apartment. You're not renting this. There's no other doorway or egress. It's for family only. They look at it like, what if you don't live there anymore? What if you sell that house and somebody thinks they can rent it? So they have to make sure that whoever buys that or who moves into it after you doesn't think that they can just rent this place. That is an important factor. I had one client who bought a house. The previous owner had put a bar downstairs. It was a big house, like a 1,200 square foot basement. And they had a bar sink and a little kitchenette. No stove, no range hood, no nothing. But when we went to do their kitchen, we did a main floor and we knocked out a beam. So that had to be inspected, engineers and everything. Well, they go downstairs to check the point load so that there's no footing, and they see this little kitchenette with a sink. And he said, hey, we're going to need to deal with that. We're going to need to talk about that. So the client ended up having to submit a letter. Now, they weren't happy with us, but it wasn't our fault. We didn't do anything wrong. It's not my fault that I don't know whoever built your house didn't get a permit for the kitchenette downstairs. That's not my fault. Now, they had to provide a letter signed saying that they would not rent that as a basement apartment or use it as a bedroom and blah, blah, blah. In the past, it had been like a $1,500 lawyer's letter. This time it was just sign here, make sure these clauses are in it, and we're all good. So that's my inspection infraction episode for this month. Not that I'm going to do another one, but this is the YouTube live for this month. I'm going to do another one in 2 weeks. Please, if you have any questions, comments, put them in the comments. Send me an email. I would love to do more questions from you guys. I will be probably doing this up until the weather gets really nice. I was just outside shooting hoops with my kids. So once the weather starts getting nice, you all are probably going to be outside or not in front of your computers. So we'll probably take a break June, July, most of August, maybe get till school ends. So middle of June till the end of August, we're probably going to take a break. But until then, I'm going to do these every 2 weeks. On that note, I'm going to say thanks for checking in and good luck on your project.